Hi, my name's Art. I am also known as a real estate vet. By finding this video, you must have gotten our infographic that explains how to automate your property management for single family rentals. This process that I'm going to go through is a 10-year process in the making. It's taking us a lot of every single thing I'm telling you is from experience of something that we've actually done. My team here, it started off with just me, but now it's a team. These are all pieces that we use to make the process of finding a tenant, qualifying the tenant, getting them in the property, and having a good ongoing relationship where they have defined expectations, and we know our expectations, and they know they're going to need to meet our expectations in the rental. So I'm going to go over this really quickly. Let's get right into it. The first thing to know is that your screening process of screening a tenant starts with your marketing. It's all tied together. I don't even want people that don't meet my criteria to reach out about the property. I want to screen starting all the way from the desire of knowing about the property all the way down to where we move them into the property. So your screening starts with your marketing. So you're going to set your marketing up like this, or at least in our experience, we've set our marketing up like this and had a lot of success with it. You're going to want to take a minimum of 15 pictures, interior and exterior. These are front, back, the backyard, the garage, the driveway, the front of the property. Even if you can, take a couple of neighborhood pictures. Just to show people where they're moving into. You want to get interior pictures of every room, including the laundry room, the basement if you have one, just so they get a full-on view of where they're moving and what's everything that's involved. Next, you're going to want to watermark all your pictures because there's a lot of scammers out there, and as you market, scammers have a tendency to steal unwatermarked pictures, and when they steal them, they will then use them on a scam ad and try to get people to give them money based on your property. And then you'll get calls that, hey, this property was listed someplace else and it was only this much money. And it's a scam that has used your picture. So the best way to get around that is to watermark. Look at some of the other videos where I go into how to watermark your photos, but I'm not going to get into that in this video. Next, you want to be descriptive in your when you write the synopsis of your rental or your ad. You want to be very descriptive. Now, you want to be descriptive about the property. You want to describe all the good stuff about the property, the area where the schools are at, and things like that. But you do want to be descriptive in what you require from a tenant. You want to say that in the marketing, not to discourage people, but people that don't even become close to the criteria. You want to let them know that this is what we're requiring and they won't even apply. It saves you time and it saves them time. You don't want to waste either of your time. Next, you do not want to give a phone number in your ad. This is a common mistake I see a lot of people make. There's two reasons why you don't want to do this. First, if you give a phone number, unless you're prepared to answer the phone every single time, you're wasting time. You don't want people calling your number, and people search for apartments all kinds of weird times at night, unless you want calls at 2 a.m. and they are not caring about your time. They don't care about your time to not call at 2 a.m. So to avoid all of that, we don't suggest giving a phone number in your ad. Instead, you're going to link to a pre-screening app. I'm going to explain that in the next step. But you want them to go to the link and do the pre-screen before they even talk to you. Next, you're going to use Google Forms, and I've got another video on this about Google Forms and making a pre-screening app. You're going to ask some very basic but relevant questions about their situation, their finances, their who's moving in with them, all these basic things you need to know to make sure that this fits somebody that you want to put into your property. And so that's how you're going to use marketing, at least the marketing in part of your screening process. Next, you want to automate showings. You want to automate showings so that you don't personally have to go show your property. Now, I know this is going to be a little bit scary for most people. It was scary for me when I first heard this idea, when I first tried it, but I can tell you it works great. You're going to put a lockbox on your property. Don't put it on the front door because if you're, depending on the area you're in, some people, again, looking out for scammers and things like that, sometimes they look for doors with lock boxes because it lets them know the house is vacant. What I like to do is put it on a railing or put it someplace inconspicuous where it's still locked to the house, but then I can tell people where to find the lockbox. And then you're going to set up your showings based on the pre-screens, the people that seem like they're a good fit. You haven't even talked to them, but you're going to set up showings. You don't want to hold a long conversation when you call your pre-screens back. You want to say, hey, you called about, or you filled out a pre-screen app, and it's free, by the way. You filled out a pre-screen app about this property. We're doing showings on this date, or you give 1 or 2 days. I like to give a date and say the next time we're doing showings is this date. Can you make it? And you want to send them for a set time, and then they'll say, yeah, I can come, and I can get there at 10 or whatever. And then you're going to say, well, the house is on a lockbox, so I'm going to give you a code that's good for that day, and then you can use that code. And then make sure they say, okay, give them the code over the phone. Don't text them the code, but actually talk to a person and give them the code over the phone. Now, some of you can be concerned about scammers or something getting in your property, but you're going to do a pre-screen. And then what I also suggest is there's a whole process to this. We have them actually take a picture with their phone of them holding up their ID next to their face, and that's everybody we give the lockbox code to. And if they've gone through all that, that usually gets rid of anybody that's being kind of scammy. Plus, at the end of the day, after all the screenings are done, you can always go check on your property and change the lockbox code, because I don't suggest keeping the same lockbox code, but it works great. The other benefit is that with setting these showings on the same day and at the same time or around the same time, people are going to bump into each other. Now, that might not seem like a good thing, but that actually is a very good thing, because everybody wants what everybody wants, and that's going to create a demand where you didn't even show up to the house, but there are other families looking at the house. So now, instead of them deciding if this house is for them, they're looking at it as, do I want to get this house? I'm going to try to get this house before they get this house. It becomes kind of a competition, and it does a great job to create interest and desire for your property, which is what you want to create. Next, once you've chosen a tenant, or once you narrowed it down, you're going to do what the actual screening that you do. Now, we do alternate screening, and I have a whole video about this that I'll put out that describes why I do alternate screening. One of the big reasons to do alternate screening is because you get better information on how a person lives. We actually screen by bank data instead of credit. If you think about it, especially if you're in a low to moderate income area, a lot of times credit will get rid of most tenants. And then the people that do have a decent credit, the way things are now, they've done all these kind of clean up their credit things, or they've had somebody fake their credit report, or make up their, clean up their credit just temporarily. Bank data shows a much better insight into how they live. It shows what bills they pay, how much money they bring in, how often they get paid. Are they consistent with their bill payments? Do their bill payments jump around? That shows if they've got late fees. That means they're not paying on time. Do their payment dates jump around? It gives you a lot of insight. Now, we used to manually go through bank statements and look for transactions and do all this stuff, but there have been some great services that come out that actually do screening by bank data. You can use one of those services, and they do a great job of giving you just the information that you're concerned about. And they also protect the tenant, because the tenant doesn't have to give you bank statements, which they might feel some kind of way about. They can actually log in onto the service, and then the service will download their bank data and then show it to you in a report. So you never actually see their bank data. The other thing it does is it also verifies their identity, because you'll see the name on the bank account, which lets you know it's the person you're dealing with. You also want to choose realistic criteria and weigh each applicant against them. This gets into making sure you're checking apples against apples and oranges against oranges to make sure that this person is you're comparing everybody by the same criteria. I'll get into more on that later. Next, you want to choose your tenant, but then there's an important step of following up with the second and third place applicants that you have, and letting them know that they weren't chosen for this place, but you'll keep them in mind, and you might have some other places coming up in the near future, and they'll be the first to know, and they're already pre-approved if they've already done the application. This works well if you're a growing investor like I am, and like I've been in the past, where we're constantly getting new properties because I can pre-screen, and now they know how serious our process is. So now when I tell them we've got a place on the market or coming on the market, it flies. They want to get it as quickly as possible. So that's very important. And then next, you want to, when you sit down and actually go over the lease, you want to review the lease in person with that tenant at signing. That is extremely important because a lot of people I've seen in the past, they just give the tenant the lease, tell them to sign it and send it back. Most tenants are people, and they don't read leases. They don't go through all of the stuff and read the details. And this way, if you sit down with them, you can go over the important points with them and make sure they understand them and that you are both on the same page. Now, once you got your tenant in, you want to automate your payments. We use an escrow service to collect rents. An escrow service is great. They will do not only rent collection where the payments come in, but they also do if there's a late pay, they do the calls. They automatically set up the late payments. They take payment in a couple of different forms. And they deal with if the tenant hasn't paid or you got a slow paying tenant, they'll do the collection calls, those uncomfortable conversations like, where's the rent? They'll do all of that stuff for you, so you don't have to interact in a negative way with your tenant, and then you can always have another person to put it on. So, hey, we need you to do this. It's not me, it's the escrow company. They need this done, and it gives you a person to kind of blame things on if you need to. You also want to charge the tenant. This is your personal preference, but we charge the tenant the escrow service fee as a convenience fee. So essentially, the escrow service is free for us. Escrow services usually run about $20 to $25 a month per tenant, but it's very well worth it, and it actually benefits the tenant because it can do things like it can report to their credit, which helps them build credit, which is important to a lot of tenants. And then this is another option with the escrow service. You can tell them to pay the taxes, the mortgage, and the way we have it set up, they pay those things when the rent comes in, and then they just direct deposit only the profit to our account. So every time we get up and we check our accounts, we've gotten the direct deposits of just the profit for the property. So the mortgage has been paid, the taxes have been paid. Now that's your personal preference, but I particularly love it because I don't like sitting there writing out checks or going through and setting up auto payments. And if you set up auto payments and the tenant pays late, then you run the risk of it bouncing or something like that, or it taking money that you weren't expecting. With them doing it, then you don't have to worry about that because they're only going to pay those bills once the money has come into that tenant. So from that tenant. So that's another excellent option. And finally, to automate your system, you're going to want to automate repair calls. Payments and repair calls are the two biggest times you're going to deal with your tenants. I suggest setting up a team. It doesn't have to be any kind of formal team, just a repair service that you reach out to. You say, hey, usually we use a handyman, a plumber, and an electrician. Sometimes it's all three, but most of the time it's one of each. And we'll say, hey, we're going to send you jobs. And if we're able to send you jobs, you'll be our go-to guy. You discuss terms on how they like to get paid automatically or with, Zelle or Chase Quick Pay or whatever you use. You can set up where they go out to the job and they call you with an estimate. We actually use the escrow company that we have. We actually use them to send the repair calls. So the tenant calls into the escrow company, the same place they make payment to, and they'll say, hey, this needs to be fixed. And then the escrow company will either call us and then we can set it up so we don't have to deal with the tenant being irate and calling at 2 a.m. because the toilet's making a dripping sound. Or you can have them call the handyman service directly. They can schedule the handyman service to go out, and then the handyman can just call you with the estimate on the work. Either way, that's kind of a personal choice. And the last piece, you want to set up an annual inspection service. I like to set up like one of the home inspection services, get a relationship with them, go to them and say, hey, I've got X number of rental properties, and I'm going to want to set up an annual or a semi-annual or quarterly inspection. And it's usually not as much as a full inspection because they're just going out and checking the place over, looking for anything that's preventative maintenance as opposed to fixing something. If they see a gas line or something that's about to break or probably needs to be replaced, they'll let you know, and then you can send out the repair people before it breaks so it's not a big headache later on. It works great, and the cost of this stuff is very minimal, but it automates your system, and you will pretty much, following these steps, You will have very little interaction. You will only get payments of profit to your account, and you will be able to relax and go on vacation. So if you like this video, if this makes sense to you, if you have questions, please comment below with questions. I'll be monitoring this and answering questions. If it's something that keeps coming up, I'll make a video about it. But I want to welcome you. Hopefully you hit the subscribe button and you follow Rent2Wealth. This is our formal training site where we talk about training and all the different things that we teach about our process of management of property and how we've been successful in automating our management. But I wish you well, and I hope this helps you, and good luck. Till next time.